Hi Year 5, hope you're well. This is the English lesson for this week. The learning objective is to plan an adventure story. But before we do that, we are going to have a look at the features of an adventure story and also how to successfully use dialogue in our story. Now you will need a pen and a paper, or pencil if you prefer. Can you remember anything that we have recently read that perhaps may have been an adventure story, Year 5? Yes, well done. The Explorer is an adventure story. It's a really good example of an adventure story because the characters are part of a plane crash and they discover a hidden city and it has lots of different secrets and they actually find the Explorer, don't they? So this is a really good example. Before we do that and before we investigate further, we're going to have a look at the features of an adventure story. Now hopefully you have all read and have been able to watch the teachers reading The Explorer. If you've not quite finished, then give yourself time to catch up on it. Okay, so I'm going to pull out some features and we are going to have a think about whether they are a feature of an adventure story or whether they're not features of an adventure story. So let's choose one. Build up to an issue. Build up to an issue. Now if we think back to The Explorer, was there a build up to an issue? There was, wasn't there? The build up to the issue was that they needed to locate or get out of that rainforest. So that's definitely a feature of an adventure story, build up to an issue. Let's choose another one. Short sentences. I wonder what we use short sentences for. I know you know this in Year 5. We can use short sentences to build suspense or tension. I think we would definitely use this in an adventure story. So that's going to go there. Diagrams. Do we really see that many diagrams in a fiction text? Not really. So I'm going to say not a feature of an adventure story. Dilemma/problem. There definitely was a dilemma and problem. There were lots of dilemmas and problems actually throughout The Explorer, especially when he was trying to learn how to fly the plane. So far, we have build up to an issue, short sentences, dilemma and problem. Beginning. Definitely, we do have beginnings in a story, don't we? So I'm going to pop that at the top. Now these aren't necessarily in order, but if you want to put them in order, then you can. Okay, what does this one say? Fact boxes. Are there often fact boxes in a story, Year 5? No, that's right, there's no fact boxes in a story. They tend to feature in a non-fiction text. How about character/setting description? There needs to be a character and setting description for an effective story. Without that, the story is a bit boring to read, isn't it? An ending. Well, there's definitely an ending in every story. A resolution to a problem. What does resolution mean, Year 5? It means that the problem has been solved. In The Explorer, the problem was solved. They did manage to get out of that rainforest, didn't they? Bullet points? What do you think, Year 5? I don't think that bullet points go in an adventure story. Again, they would fit more with a non-fiction text. Expanded noun phrases. You know this one. Expanded noun phrases definitely go in an adventure story. It makes the description exciting and enhancing. Titles. Do we often see titles in an adventure story? I'm going to put no, not features of an adventure story. Again, you tend to find these in a non-fiction text. Show, not tell. Something we've done a lot in Year 5. I know that you all know this. This is definitely a feature of an adventure story. Show, not tell enhances your description and makes your story much more interesting. Oh, I've got one more. Dialogue with inverted commas. Okay. Now, I know that dialogue is a feature of an adventure story. But before we look at dialogue, I would like you to pause the video now and write down in your notebooks on a piece of paper what you think dialogue is. When do we use dialogue? What is the definition of it? And how do we use it successfully? So if you pause the video now, I'm going to flip my board round and we're going to have a look at our next task. Okay, well done, year 5. So dialogue is a conversation between 2 or more people. Now, we see dialogue a lot in adventure stories because it is a feature of a story. Now, what I want to do, this is my turn, but it can also be our turn. So if you want to do it with me, that's absolutely fine. Now, I need to create some steps to success for dialogue. So I have taken a section from the Explorer, a section of dialogue, and I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to create steps to success together. So, Plymouth is in England, said Fred. I didn't know you had fish in England, said Max. Now you will notice the dialogue, that what they're actually speaking is in red, and the person that said it I've put in black, just to make it easy to see. So, what does speech start with? The first step to success, what does speech start with? Have a look, year 5. What have we got here? What do we call this? Well done. So the first step to success is inverted commas, for the spoken word, the spoken words. Okay, that's our first step to success. Inverted commas for the spoken words. Now you'll notice there's not an inverted comma after where it says said Fred, because Fred didn't say said Fred. Fred said Plymouth is in England. Okay, keep looking. What else is our next step to success? What comes after the inverted commas on both of these lines? Capital letter, well done. So capital letter, to start speech. So it's a capital letter to start speech. I'm going to put in brackets after inverted so capital letter, so we've got inverted commas for the spoken word, yep, capital letter to start the speech, so after the inverted comma. Now, if I read here, Plymouth is in England. I didn't know you had fish in England. There's punctuation. Does the punctuation go before or after the inverted comma? Well done, year 5. Punctuation goes inside the inverted commas. So let's change it right in here. Punctuation inside inverted commas. Okay, what do you notice about when a new speaker speaks? Fred's on this line, Max is on this line. So new speaker, new line, well done. New speaker, new line. Anything else that we've got? Now, year 5, if you actually read this, we'll read it again together. Plymouth is in England, said Fred. And then Max moves the conversation on by saying, I didn't know you had fish in England. So for effective dialogue, it needs to move the story on. We don't want dialogue talking about the same thing for pages and pages. So the final one is needs to move story on. Okay, so here we have our steps to success, year 5. In a moment, you're going to see a task that I would like you to do for your term. Now, it's going to be a section that I've taken and written out from the Explorer, but it hasn't followed the steps to success. So what I would like you to do is rewrite it following these steps to success and then send it into the year 5 email address. So if you get ready to do that, I will show you your two. Thanks, Miss Evans. Hi Year 5, I hope you're well and that you've been working hard on looking at what makes an adventure story, well, an adventure story, and on working on inverted commas, Miss Evans. It helped refresh my memory too, which is always good. Before we start on anything today, I just want to say how impressed we were with the work that you sent us from last week on your DD sentences and your two pair sentences. It was so nice to see so many of you giving the challenges a go, especially with the new skill of a two pair sentence, so well done. So today, our learning objective is to plan an adventure story. Now, the reason we plan is so we can ensure that we include all the key details we want to, including our description, as well as the features of an adventure story. And when we come to writing, it means that we'll have all our ideas in one place so we can put them all together and make our story. It's good to plan not only in writing though, but in everyday life. I know when I moved into this house, I planned all the renovations so we knew what was happening and when. I'm going to go over now how we can plan our story so we can start writing it next week. Take a look at this. Here is a general structure of an adventure story. In the beginning, our main character is introduced and so is a setting. We then build up to an issue. The character is set maybe a challenging task. A dilemma or problem arises. Here they may encounter danger. Next is the resolution, and this is where they are able to find a solution and overcome the problem. Finally is the ending. Here everything is tied together and ends on something positive. Perhaps the character completed his task. So when we're planning our story, we need to think of a few things we need to include that will help us when we come to writing it. Here I've drawn a blank story mountain and I've put the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 on it to represent each part that I mentioned just a moment ago. Now what that will do is that will help to formulate the structure of each paragraph. So paragraph 1 will be about the beginning, 2 about the build-up, 3 about the dilemma, etc. Or it might be, if you want to write a longer story, that each one of these numbers will form a chapter of the story instead. Okay, so in a moment I'm going to put a picture of this on the screen for you to copy down onto a piece of paper using either a pen or a pencil. So take a look at this and copy it down. Okay, so it's my turn. I'm going to have a go at adding some information onto my story map about my story. So I'm going to write a story that's in the rainforest. Obviously it's an adventure story. And I'm going to take some inspiration from our topic textbook from last half term, which is The Explorer. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend it. Okay, so I've got an image here of a plane that has crashed. Okay, and that's what happened at the start of The Explorer as well. And I'm going to take inspiration to that. So I'm going to briefly write down what happens. Remember, this should only be notes. So there's a plane crash. My character will maybe wake up in the mud and not know where they are. Maybe they've been separated from their family who are on board the plane. Okay, thinking about that, we could put plane crashes. Let's give my character a name. Let's go with Robert. So Robert wakes up and he's disorientated in the mud and his family are nowhere to be seen. Okay, so plane crash. Robert wakes up disorientated. And his family are nowhere to be seen. Okay, so now let's try and describe the setting. Remember we said last week in our English video about using descriptive language. It's really important that we try and give the reader a vivid image in their head. So when I'm planning, I'm going to try and use lots of descriptive language now as well. So for the setting, let's think about using an expanded noun phrase maybe. So we use adjectives there to describe, don't we? We've been on the floor after he's had to come up the plane's crashed. So perhaps he's in the mud. Let's describe the mud. So it's dirty and sticky. Oh, I know, I think I might have a look on Visual Words and up-level some words. So I did that earlier. And I have got putrid and grimy. So I'm going to add that here. Putrid, grimy, mud.
Next, I'm going to think about how my character's feeling. So the plane just crashed, as I mentioned. So how are they going to be feeling? Well, they're not going to know where they are. They're going to be disorientated, probably confused, and I would imagine, I don't know about you, year 5, but I'd be quite panicked. I'd be quite worried about where I was. So I'm going to add those 3 ED words, and this would help us to make a 3 ED sentence, which I'll explain in just a moment. So I'm going to put disorientated, I said confused and panicked. Let's look at a 3 ED sentence. 3 ED sentences begin with 3 related adjectives, each of which ends in ED. Frightened, terrified, exhausted, the princess ran for home. Each of the adjectives is separated by a comma, and then we need another comma before the clause starts. Okay, let's think about if I can add any extra description now, any extra details. So I could do that maybe with personification or a simile or a metaphor. So thinking about his surroundings that I had in that picture, I would imagine that there's lots of leaves and bushes there, and I would imagine that as he's trying to get through, perhaps they're stopping him. Maybe he's trying to get up and they're stopping him from doing that. So I'm going to say that they're like grabbing him, so I'm going to use personification. So bushes and leaves grabbed his hands and feet, or grabbed his hands and ripped his clothes. So bushes and leaves, or just bushes. Bushes grabbed his hands. I've got some description there that I can use that's helping me to get an idea about that paragraph or that chapter of my story. Let's have a look at what we include in our steps to success. So I've definitely got some bullet points about what my story's about. I've then got my expanded noun phrase showing me about the setting. I've got my 3 EDs that tell me how the character's feeling, and then I've included some personification to give me some extra description. So they are going to be our steps to success. We put those up there. Describe the setting using the expanded noun phrase. How is the character feeling using a 3 ED sentence opener. Add extra description using things like a metaphor, simile or personification. And remember to include bullet points about the plot. So this is what's happening in this part of the story. Okay, let's have a look at the next part of the story. So I have got, let's put that picture just there because that will remind me that's what it's about there. So if you want to print some pictures off at home, you can do that too. I've got this picture here. If you can see that. This picture here. He's all tried to help me about where he'd be going to in the jungle. Light's a bit shiny in here today. And then this picture here. Now this one is what I think he's going to discover in this part of my story, and it looks like a Mayan village to me. So in the second part of the story is where he's maybe got to an opening in the jungle and he sees a Mayan village. This is the build-up part, this is number 2. So perhaps, what's he going to find here? Perhaps he could be greeted by someone but not anybody he knows, it's not a family member. Again, it's a bit like the Explorer when Fred, Conliner and Max meet somebody else. So I'm going to write on here then that he arrives at a clearing and finds a what he thinks is a Mayan village and meets somebody new. The next part of my steps to success says that I need to include an expanded noun phrase to describe the setting. So I'm going to think about the Mayan huts, the village that he found. So I'm going to say that they're wooden and they're old, but I used visual words and a thesaurus to look for different words, and I found, which is what you can do too, and I found the word time worn, because obviously it's been worn over time. So I'm going to use those 2 things. So I'm going to put here wooden, time worn huts. Okay, there's my expanded noun phrase. My next thing that I'm moving on to is going to be my 3 ED opener. So how is he feeling when he gets here? I reckon he's going to be quite tired. He's probably walked quite a long distance to battle through the trees and the leaves. He's probably quite bewildered. He doesn't know where he is. And when he sees this, I imagine he's going to be quite guarded, quite sort of unsure about what to do or what it is or where he should, if he should go there even. Okay, so I'm going to go with that. Okay, fatigued, bewildered and guarded. And then finally, I'm going to add any extra detail, and I'm going to use sonification again. And I thought that especially in this image here, the trees looked a bit like they were all standing, a bit like an army, all in rows. And I reckon they're going to part to reveal the clearing where the Mayan huts are. So, the army of trees parted to reveal a clearing. Here is my story map so far. As you can see, I've added the images to it too. If you can't print them at home, perhaps you could draw them and add them to your story map instead. Here are some more images that have given me inspiration for the different parts of my story. You can use the same ideas if you would like, or you can have a different twist to yours. My plan is that the plane crashes, then he finds a Mayan temple or village and he goes in search of his family. They set him a task and he has to venture deep into the Mayan temple. Something happens though, and he ends up in trouble. Fortunately, somebody comes to save him. Then he's reunited with his family at the end. One of the most important things that you need to consider is your plot. You need to make sure that it's really clear and it follows those 5 points we mentioned right at the start of today's lesson. Make sure it has that build-up, that dilemma, that problem, and the resolution. Your story should give the reader lots of description and should leave them on the edge of their seats. Don't worry about that right now though, we'll look at that next week, but it's important that you keep that in your back of your mind whilst you're planning. Okay, it's your turn now. Here are your Chili challenges. Take a look. Chili 1 is to complete an adventure story plan, adding expanded noun phrases and the 3 ED openers. Chili 2 is to apply your knowledge of different sentence types, adding your own to your plan. For example, similes, metaphors, sonification. You could even do a 2 pairs or a DD sentence that we focused on last week. Add one of these to each part of your plan. Here is an example. If you're unsure on how to create a DD sentence or a 2 pair sentence, visit last week's lesson on our YouTube playlist. Finally, Chili Challenge 3 is to create some sentences using your notes and descriptions that you could use in your writing next week. For example, you could write a sentence using the expanded noun phrase that you've written about the setting, or use a 3 ED openers about the character's feelings. Here is an example to give you an idea. You can write these sentences separately but keep them handy for next week. You could even begin to think about the dialogue between the characters using your recap knowledge from Miss Evans. For example, here's some speech that I have written using inverted commas about the person that my character meets. Here are your steps to success to help you with what to include at each point on your story mountain. Hopefully we've given you lots of inspiration and ideas for your story and hopefully going to be able to start planning it using different sentence types that we've shown you today. Remember, it's really important just to get those expanded noun phrases down and those 3 EDs about how the character is feeling and what the setting is like. As always, please send your plans to the Year 5 email address. We'd love to see your story ideas. I'll be back here next week with Miss Evans and we'll be starting to look at how we can write our story. But for now, it's your turn to complete your plans. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.